Hello, welcome to Mr. John's Story Time. I hope you've had a nice day today. I've been busy in the garden, potting all my plants. Tonight we're going to read My Book About Me by Mr. Silly, part of the Mr. Men series by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Silly wanted to write a book. Now, what can I write about? He said to himself. He took a sip from his mug of hot toast. I know, I can write about me, he suddenly declared. So Mr. Silly got a pad of paper and began. He dipped a carrot into a pot of ink and began to write, messily. It is not easy to write with a carrot, but Mr. Silly did not use a pen. That would be far too sensible. He wrote down the title. My Book About Me. And then he wrote about the time that he went to the Nonsense Land bookshop and bought a book. One page at a time. It took a very long time to buy it. But then Mr. Silly changed his mind. Just writing about himself would be a bit boring. I would disagree, but Mr. Silly had made his mind up. Or was that down? You never can tell with Mr. Silly. He decided that he would include his friends in his book. If his friends were in his book, they would want to read it. First of all, he wrote about Mr. Wrong. Mr. Wrong reads his books upside down, whereas Mr. Topsy-Turvy reads his books back to front. So he would begin with the ending and end with the beginning. How topsy-turvy! Mr. Silly wrote about Mr. Greedy and his many cookery books, and Little Miss Magic and her amazing book of spells. Then there was a chapter on Mr. Busy, a very short chapter. Mr. Busy is too busy to finish any book. Finally, Mr. Silly wrote about Mr. Happy. Well, it is always nice to finish with a happy ending. Mr. Silly was very pleased with his story. He decided to invite all round his friends who were going to be in his book for the big reveal. But first, he had to make it. He went out to his shed and took down a saw and a hammer and a box of nails, which was odd. It took him all night long to make the book. Mr. Silly's book was big as a house, with a door. Mr. Silly opened the door and invited everyone in. Welcome to my book, he said. I have something to announce, he continued. You'll all be very pleased to hear that you'll all be famous because you're all now in my book. How very silly. That was a great book, wasn't it? All about Mr. Silly and his book all about me. Now, it's time for you to go to bed and have sweet dreams and then wake up in the morning for lots of fun and lots of playtime. Good night.